Welcome to Daily Covfefe on Unsafe Space. I'm your host, Carter Laren. Today is June 11th, Tuesday, June 11th. Yes, I was looking it up as I was saying that because I was clueless of the date. But I don't have, unlike Keri, who's my co-host here, I don't have a paper calendar. I have the 22nd century. No, 21st century. And but the 22nd century, I'll just intuitively know, or we'll all be living in caves. Good morning, Keri.
Good morning, Carter. You don't know how joyful it is to have a big paper calendar. I'm going to have to get you one.
We're all going to be living in caves in the 22nd. I don't know why
you're right.
22nd century. I wanted to say 21st century, and I just felt like, no, I must be old and have missed something. It must be we must be a century later.
There must be a century I missed.
No, it's not a century later. You're just old. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Keri. Yesterday, so here's I wore this after the show yesterday around the house.
That's great.
This is our shirt, one of our shirts. They run a little small. Comfy shirt runs a little small, so just beware. Because I know everyone's gonna rush out and buy shirts now.
I'll post that link today.
Yeah, you can just go to unsafespace.com. There's a shop button. Click it. So, Keri, we were talking about what to talk about, and you pay attention to California more than I do, even though I live here, apparently. Why don't you tell people what the hell's been happening in Sacramento that I've not been paying attention to?
This just on its face seems ridiculous to me. I just saw the news that Gavin Newsom, which I still forget that you guys voted him in.
Oh, God. I mean, I tried to block out that he was mayor of San Francisco when I lived in the city. Yes, and then we voted him into Sacramento, and now he's running our state. And by the way, the reason to pay attention to California, I think people know this, but, we tend to signal where the country's going, usually for the worse.
Yeah. Well, you guys just passed this thing that he's signing into law. Wait, what is it? Oh, they reached a final draft of your state's 2020 budget on Sunday. It's going to expand healthcare to illegal immigrants, and it'll cost taxpayers around $100 million to do that. As part of $100 million, yeah. So it's going to be available to low-income illegal immigrants under the age of 26. They'll be eligible now for California's Medicaid. They think this will add approximately 90,000 new people to the price tag, which is around $100 million. And to raise that money, they're going to do something similar to Obamacare. They're going to begin taxing residents who don't have health insurance in order to help ease the program's financial burden. So they're creating an individual mandate penalty. So if you, essentially, this is what this says to me in my head, if you can't afford health insurance, we're going to charge you a fee, because and presumably all the people I know who didn't have health insurance and who chose to pay the fee for Obamacare is because they couldn't afford insurance. And even if they were paying $1,000 fee a year, that was less than paying for insurance. So we're going to charge you $1,000, let's say, per year, so that we can take that $1,000 and use it to buy health insurance for non-citizens, for illegal immigrants. Backwards, right?
Welcome to California. So let's just a couple things. I wasn't paying attention to this, obviously. And God, I need to leave this state. But first of all, I just want to clarify something. This is leftist math, because leftists are morons and don't know that humans in response to incentives. They fail to understand that humans respond to incentives, which is odd because they're also central planners and they think they're so smart they can plan everything, but they don't understand the first thing about how human beings work, which is just so bizarre to me. But when you start giving away free healthcare to more illegal immigrants, guess what you get more of?
Healthcare? No kidding.
Illegal. You get more illegal immigrants, right? So yeah, this will go up over time. And this healthcare is right. I mean, so first of all, look, I live in the Bay Area. If you are not a Facebook millionaire or whatever, like if you're not involved in one of these tech companies and you've made a lot of money or making a lot of money, and there are a lot of people here in the Bay Area who have made a lot of money, right? Even like if you have a bank account that's got a couple $1 million in it in the Bay Area, you're like middle class in your community. Like there's not a lot of,
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of wealth here. However, I'll say middle class, but whatever. You feel like people feel middle class. Average people at work at tech companies have way more disposable income than people in the rest of the country would imagine they have. Well, I won't say disposable. They have way more income than the rest of the people in the country could imagine. But first of all, the cost of living is huge because that all drives up. It drives up housing prices. It drives up the cost of everything. But there's a lot of people who are regular people who work at In-N-Out or work at Target or, have regular jobs like blue collar people or even white collar people with kind of regular jobs that aren't techie. I guess white collar maybe gets paid more, but it's really fucking hard to live in the Bay Area if you're not wealthy, if you're not one of these, if you're not making a shit ton of money from your Facebook stock, it's hard to live in the Bay Area, really hard. And so the average kind of what you think of as the typical average American, like your mechanic who's sporting a family or whatever, like the typical guy that you think of or woman, it's a nightmare. It is hellacious for them to live here. It's really hard. They struggle their ass off. And a lot of those people have dignity enough that they don't want to run to California and use California's Medicaid or any of their, financial assistance programs. They're trying to make it on their own because they feel like they should, because they've got a job. And frankly, they should be able to make it on their own and pay for their own stuff. Like in a free market, they would be fine. But, California they've already had this problem with, there's been articles about this over the last several years about regular people not even being able to afford to be in the Bay Area. And of course, the people that are writing the articles, it's only a problem for them because they can't, like, who will mow my lawn and how am I going to get my maid? My maids can't afford to live here. Right? Like that's the big problem. Like, hey, who's going to be at the checkout at Whole Foods? But it is a problem already, and this just compounds it. And the reason that this is what they want to do, yes, it has to do with healthcare. It also has to do with they want everyone to have a relationship with the government, right? So if you say, well, I can't afford healthcare, how am I going to afford this fee? Their answer will be, oh, well, if you can't afford healthcare, you should be on our special Medicaid California thing. You should be on government healthcare. Come to Papa. You should be part of the state's apparatus. They want to capture as many people as possible as a part of the state's apparatus. And the best thing to do that is to start mandating people pay for things and just start making those more draconian, making the punishments more draconian. And you filter more and more people start coming in. They get forced to get into the system. And once you're in the system, you're kind of stuck. So, this California is, people joke about People's Republic of California. It is socialist. It's a socialist hellhole. It's a piece of shit state. And I hope it secedes. If it secedes, I'll definitely leave. I've got some personal things tying me here, but if it secedes, I'm out.
So you support California seceding?
Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely.
Oh, interesting. Because I saw
how good this would be for the rest of the country if for California to secede. It would be awful.
I never thought of it that way. So after the election, I saw some of I went in one direction trying to figure out why Trump won. And some of my other friends just went in the other direction and completely doubled down and became even more woke SJWs. And some of those some of those who live in California and are super SJWs started advocating for California to secede. And I was like, no, we don't want civil war. We don't want disunion.
No, I want civil war at this point. I'm tired of this. I'm sick of it. I think there's a lot of people who are just like, can you just fight openly so I can shoot back? Like, it's tiresome.
That's funny. That's the funny way of putting it.
So yeah, the SJWs and I agree. California should secede.
Oh, you agree? You agree with SJWs? That's interesting.
And people like me, I'll just leave, and all of the woke people from Seattle can run to California or whatever, and it'll be great. And they can build their socialist utopia. And actually, it will go well for them for a little while because there's a lot of wealth in California. So they'll have borrowed time they can live on for a while. It's like a trust fund baby. California's like, the state is like a big trust fund baby, right? The state is bloated and it's got a shitty lifestyle and spends too much money. But mom and dad, i.e. the tech industry, mom and dad just keep signing checks. But eventually that'll run out and they'll crash the Ferrari and something will change. So.
Well, and let's be clear for people who don't, I guess, maybe who don't understand. See, when you're in the left bubble, like I was in, completely leftist, you don't really understand why anybody would be against Obamacare because you're only hearing the positive parts of it. That's all that your echo chamber is focusing on. And there were one of the positive parts of it, and you may disagree with me on this because I'm sure there's unseen costs that I haven't considered. But for friends of mine with pre-existing conditions, it was a blessing because.
Oh my God, really? That you think is good? Holy shit. That's one of the biggest unseen costs ever. You've got to be fucking kidding me.
Okay, explain.
Do you not know how actuarial tables work?
No, I don't.
Do you not know how insurance works?
So is it because you've added all these people who are not who are not healthy that now all the prices go up, right?
Of course.
Okay. Well, I guess I do understand it. I still like the idea of people like the idea of their friend. This is a personal thing. Well, this goes back to this whole thing about like one story is greater than 10,000 facts. Like the book I just finished reading, Love Your Enemies. He's talking about, so everybody knows a friend with a pre-existing condition who didn't have health insurance before.
Sure, but it's a mark of intelligence to be able to construct concrete narratives in your head from data. And if you can't do that, you shouldn't vote.
Touche.
I mean, I don't have to know people who are affected by this plan to know and imagine in my head the thousands and thousands of people who are going to struggle to pay their bills and have real life economic and
Well, can you put that into a story?
Sure, I could put that in the story, I guess. I'm not a great storyteller, but my point is
the issue. Okay, wait. Let me interrupt 1 second. I want to cut you off right there because that sentence, as I was brushing my teeth this morning, I was thinking the left have great storytellers. Okay?
Right.
And that's, I mean, clearly, because if you're liberal, you're more likely to be open on the openness scale. You're more likely to be creative and all. And so,
yeah,
leftists, typically entertainment, like writers, artists.
They also tend to indulge their emotions more, and stories are emotional.
Yeah, stories are emotional. So I think for there to be balance, and I'm a person who's interested in balance because I am, even though I'm a liberal and I'm a classical liberal, I'm not a leftist anymore. And I'm starting to realize a lot of leftist policies are rooted only in good intention, but don't have the facts to support the intention. So it's like, yeah, we want everyone to be able to have health insurance, even if they have a pre-existing condition, but then they can't look further and see what that does to health insurance. Right. So there needs to be some type of balance there. Right now things are out of balance. And so in the interest of getting back into balance, like I do want to see people on the right get better at storytelling so that we can have like discussion and come to compromise again. So the right, you just said, I'm not a great story. The right needs storytellers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just saying,
yeah,
personally, I could probably improve in that area. But I guess here's the frustrating thing here. It's public education. I don't want to just throw public education yes, I do. I want to throw public education under the bus, but I don't want to keep doing that as a trope that I just repeat all the time. But when you don't, so part of teaching people to think is teaching them to connect abstract concepts with concretes in reality. So that when someone says people should get pre-existing conditions covered, people should have healthcare, you should be smart enough and understand the concepts of the words you're using should be tied to reference in reality very concretely. And you should be able to understand that sentence. That sentence to me means someone should be forced against their will to pay for someone else to do this. We should incent, like, I see all the connections of incentivizing bad behavior because pre-existing conditions don't count. And I can see the narratives and I can see all the stories in my head. I can see the connection to reality. I can see that free means taxing someone else, right? I can see, I see the gun. I see the gun that the state uses to force people to do stuff. And if you don't have those connections to reality, if you're just using abstract concepts like they're fairy tales and they sound nice or they're magic words from Harry Potter, Alohomora, people should have healthcare, you're living in a fantasy world and you shouldn't fucking vote and you shouldn't even be in the political, like, I don't want to have to use stories to talk to you. I don't want to take, your opinion doesn't matter if you need stories. Now it does, because we live in a democracy, so I do need stories. I get that. But personally, I don't have respect for people who need stories. If you need stories, you're not thinking.
Well, you don't have to have respect for them. I mean, I don't have respect
No,
for people for
I'm
all
saying we need them.
Right, respect is earned, but factually, for a person who respects facts and likes to, look at the facts, the fact is that people do have the right to vote, and people, by and large, do make their mind up based on emotion, and they do make their mind up based on a story. So the example Arthur Brooks gives in this book is like when he was put in charge of raising money for this nonprofit, right? And they operated on a budget, I think, of like 10 million a year or something. And it seemed so daunting to him. And his brother is the one who was like, just tell them one story. One story is much greater than $10 million, 10 million facts, 10 million things that you need.
Yeah.
So, and people get that. That's why nonprofits lead with stories. They have a picture of the kid whose stomach is swelling. They tell you about the kid. They don't give you stats on,
No, I don't disagree.
They do, but they give you a personal story. And people use that in more than just, he was making the point, it's, we use that in more than just nonprofits. Brands use it. They personalize stuff. They anthropomorphize like the products sometimes.
Of course, I'm not arguing we shouldn't use stories. And I agree, we should use stories better. My point is, there's a more fundamental problem, which is educating people to think.
True, I agree.
Think. Because otherwise, the best storyteller always wins. Stories will always be compelling, but people who think are compelled by a story and then dissect it and see if it relates to reality. And if you then stories still matter, they still compel people, but stories that aren't tethered to reality, stories that are based on falsehoods, are less compelling than stories that are based on truth.
Absolutely. That's why I think if you were to tell a story that based on the facts and that illustrated the facts, then you compare that to a story that's not based on what's going to happen if something passes, if a certain policy, then it wins, because you've got both. You've got the emotion, you've got the hook there, the human interest part, but it's based on what you're talking about, which is being able to think and reason and see, oh, this particular one individual story is illustrative of what's going to happen.
Right.
I don't know.
I guess if
I
I
get off on a
storytelling, I would talk about some mechanic who, can't afford braces for his kid or whatever. Like I would probably tell some story about like, hey, this is what will affect him. Yeah. And they'll get a bill and he's not going to be able to pay it. And he's going to have to, forego braces and his, whatever. I said,
I saw a great example of this. This just popped in my head. There's a great example of this with, everybody who watches our program is probably familiar with the fact that that college campuses have become kind of insane and hard,
Yep.
and there's a real clampdown on free expression and free speech and independent thought, and over 50% of college students say they're afraid to give their opinions on things for risking social, censure.
Right.
That's a fact, by the way. That's not a story. But anyway, one story it just popped in my head was somebody did a piece on, and I'll find it and send it to you. Somebody did a piece on this kid who was affected by this, who had to drop out of school. I think it might have been Pierce, because the school went through this entire evolution where it became all about Black Lives Matter, and then it became infected by SJW ideology, and then the whole campus climate changed. And but the story focused on this one kid who became the target of a lot of this SJW bullying, and it starts off with talking about him and how he's doing metalworking now, and it's just not that that's he's enjoying metal, but it's sort of like these are the repercussions of what happened. Look at this one kid, and they make it about that kid.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and I do think we need more of that. And having people who picking out stories of people that the state harms with its expansion, it's pretty easy. There's a lot of actual stories. I don't have to make stuff up, right? You can find people and telling those stories, and I think that would be, when we're huge, maybe we'll hire people to go out and find people to
Yeah.
tell those stories.
Well, it's funny, in the chapter about telling stories, he had this quote from, I can't remember who, it was some Catholic leader who said, if you want to find stories, like the shepherd needs to smell like the sheep.
Yeah, you need to go out. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
to get back to
like your story, I like your point about stories. And can I just, one quick thing? This is why we can relate it to yesterday's conversation. This is why controlling the narrative is important. This is why controlling legacy media is important. This is why they're freaked out. The legacy media, an example of stories that popped into my head because I was tweeting about Eric Swalwell today, who's a gun-grabbing piece of shit. And one thing the media doesn't do, there are myriad examples every month of people who use firearms to defend themselves successfully, either just by wielding it and never firing a shot, or by actually firing. And none of those stories get covered by the NPRs of the world. Instead, right, they run around and look for David Hoggs, right? So that's to me, when you're talking about stories, that's a clear example of, there's way more stories about how guns save lives than there are about how there are crazy mass murderers sometimes who go into schools or wherever. But the stories that we hear are only the latter. We never hear the former stories. And that's why the battle against legacy media matters.
It's the same thing with the false narratives that they sell us, the stories they tell us about, like they're disproportionately focusing on the number of unarmed black men killed by police, which is like,
right, not that many actually.
Yeah, it's the number is ridiculously small compared to the number of police killed on the job, or the number of citizens, the number of people killed, black people killed by black people, or white people killed by white people. Or
you're not allowed to talk on black violence. That's the narrative that we're never allowed to talk about, because that's the real problem in the black community in terms of gun violence.
Yeah. But so look at the stories they tell us, and then those stories shape people's perception of the world. And so you have people walking around now who, like I just saw this yesterday on social media, who if you say to the average person who doesn't get very in depth with their media and who consumes the narrative and believes the narrative, if you say, well, it's actually not an epidemic, there's not like a huge spate of cops killing unarmed people in general, or black people or white people, like it's just not a huge number, they'll freak out because they've been told a story repeatedly with individual faces, and they think that's the norm.
be clear, I am adamantly against the militarization of police that's happened in my lifetime, but that's a separate issue.
Well, and isn't it a sad state that we have to even say, like, I feel the need to be like, obviously, one unarmed person killed by police is bad.
Yeah.
But you have to say that now, because otherwise people assume that you're just some ogre that's like, you're pointing out that this isn't the norm. You must not care about the 6 people who were killed. Yeah, I do. That's terrible. But it's not, my point is that you can't base your belief about what the world is like on the anomaly.
Yeah, you're pointing out something else about stories, that stories are what people focus on.
Yeah.
So that may not be the biggest. Is it bad that cops kill some people? Yes, obviously. It is bad. And that is an issue. Is it the most pressing issue? No, not by a long shot.
Not hardly.
Right. But it's the most compelling. It's one of the most compelling narratives. So it becomes the priority because, and there's not a lot of stories about, hey, this, $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities is going to come kill us. Like, there's not a lot of great stories about that. I guess they would be set in the future, but there's not a lot of great stories about, hey, we're headed towards communism.
Yeah. I think I've been thinking for a while, somebody should do an updated version of Brave New World. Like that, but that's why. Did you tell the story of what's going to happen in the future,
Yeah. Or we could just study history.
Yeah.
Correctly. All right. Well, this was a not as focused as we planned, but semi-focused.
It was interesting.
And it was talk. I think this is enough. We can stop. We don't have to have hour-long shows every day.
Goodbye. I'll see you later, Carter.
All right. I'll see you later, Keri. Take care. Nice hat.